Hey guys, good evening. Good evening. It is Dr. B, the NP here with our every other week episodes with Health Tea with Dr. B. Welcome to episode 13. It is a pleasure being here with all of you again tonight. Tonight is a very special night because we are going to be discussing something that is very different than what we usually talk about. Okay, so a few weeks ago, we were discussing thyroid issues and how January is Thyroid Awareness Month. So, hopefully, you all tuned into that episode. Hopefully, you all got your thyroid checked. Hopefully, we all are doing okay. Remember that if you are not, please do not hesitate. Please type in bit.ly/health tea with Dr. B just so that you can get your issues addressed. Okay. All right. So remember again, I am a licensed medical professional. I practice in many different states, now including Utah. So that's Maryland State, Washington, D.C., Washington State, New Mexico, Colorado. So if you guys need help with any of your underlying health conditions, please do not hesitate with reaching out. So as you all know, every time we have these episodes, I debut a new tea. And usually I try to match the tea with what we're going to do tonight. But today we're not doing a health condition. So I just decided to do something called traditional medicines spearmint tea. All right. So hopefully you all can see this traditional medicine spearmint tea. So what is it? Spearmint tea is usually derived from the leaves of a spearmint plant. It's not only refreshing and it has like a lot of benefits. Let me tell you why I like spearmint tea. I have PCOS, so I am a fellow PCOSer. So studies should suggest that spearmint tea may help to regulate hormones in women, and it could actually reduce the levels of male hormones like testosterone while increasing female hormones necessary for ovulation. And that is a huge thing with PCOS, and we discuss this all the time. So you guys just need to follow Health Tea with Dr. B on Instagram and on Facebook. So what else is there with spearmint tea? It is good for oral health because it has antibacterial and antimicrobial properties. And it can just basically contribute to better oral health, right? So it can help with reducing bad breath, and it has been used traditionally for this purpose. But today I'm using it for hormonal balance and digestive health because it does help to soothe any upset stomachs and aids in digestion. And more importantly, it helps to aid with stress and anxiety relief. The smell of it alone is calming and soothing. So, drinking it may actually help to improve that anxiety or that stress relief. And also, let's think about relief from menstrual cramps. Now, what I'm not saying, you should not drink spearmint tea in place of any medication such as ibuprofen or Tylenol. Usually, you have to build it up into your system. So try to drink it every, few times per week. It actually may help. But it's also important to note that while spearmint tea does offer a lot of potential benefits, it should not replace any medical treatments. So if you are considering using spearmint tea for medicinal purposes, especially if you have existing health conditions or taking medication, it is always advised to consult with a healthcare professional. Okay? All right, so we are going to move on to our episode 13, but first, not without our disclaimer. The content provided in today's session is intended solely for informational purposes and should not be construed as direct medical advice. And while I, Dr. Beatty, aim to share valuable insights and knowledge, it is important to remember that I am not your primary care provider. So the information shared does not replace professional medical advice, diagnoses, or treatment. Okay? Now let's sip, listen, and thrive and get into episode 13, Shadows in Plain Sight, Uncovering Sex Trafficking in Our Communities. So again, this topic is very different from what we usually discuss. We are always talking about underlying health conditions. How can we get this checked and that checked? Well, today I wanted to start something or share something that is most dear to my heart. So I'm going to give you guys just a little story and just more history and background about myself. So I am a board certified family nurse practitioner, and I have been in the field now for a while now, and my background is in nursing. I've been a nurse for over 10 years now. Okay. And back in 2020, when COVID started, I became a forensic nurse examiner. And back then, I was considered to be the first nurse practitioner who also functioned as a forensic nurse examiner. Okay. It was a very interesting job, and I got into it for personal reasons and benefits and wanting to treat a specific population. I did not have any insight on human sex trafficking and what could come of it. Never knew much about it, but it became a dear baby to me because during my tenure at my last place of employment as a forensic nurse examiner, I encountered oh my gosh, numerous victims and survivors of human sex trafficking. And guess what? Their ages range from 3 years old to 89 years old. And I thought that that was the most sad reality. Imagine a baby, a child, being a victim of human sex trafficking. Imagine an 89-year-old person on hospice, on oxygen, being a victim or survivor of human sex trafficking. It was absolutely horrible. And when I got into it, I just couldn't stop. And what happened was I went back to school and I obtained my doctorate or doctoral degree. And I was inspired to open up a private special clinic for victims and survivors of human sex trafficking and domestic violence. Okay, so it is an underground clinic. No one knows about it, but that's for safety reasons. But we do have a lot of connects. So when those are being rescued from the human sex trafficking world, they know who to call, and they usually call us because we know where to send our people. So, this is why this is very near and dear to my heart. I've heard so many stories. I have been a part of many rescue missions, and yeah, it just seemed very appropriate and very fitting. Okay, so thank you all for hearing my story. So, as we observe Human Trafficking Awareness Month this January, we are going to delve into the dark world of human sex trafficking. This issue is often hidden in plain sight and it impacts countless lives around the globe. I hear so many times people say, I mean, human sex trafficking is a foreign thing. No, it's not. It's global. Human sex trafficking is literally, uh, it is literally in our backyards. I live in Maryland and we have a motel and a hotel right across the street from one another. And it's literally 5 minutes up the street. And guess what? That is the hot spot for human sex trafficking. And in the area that I live in, it is not low income that many people would think it is. It's not low income. It's actually, I would say, middle income, very busy, and you would never think that you driving past this hotel or motel that human sex trafficking is going on right then and there. Okay. So this month is human trafficking awareness, but today we're discussing human sex trafficking. So let's try to pick these two apart. Human trafficking encompasses various forms of exploitation, from forced labor to modern day slavery. Human sex trafficking specifically targets individuals for sexual exploitation through coercion, deception, or force. So, those are the two differences: sexual exploitation. Okay. So, this heinous crime transcends borders. So, it impacts people of all ages and backgrounds. It is not just confined to distant lands, but it happens locally in our communities. Okay. If we were to pay attention to our neighbors, close neighborhoods, Just pay attention to see how things move. Why? Because human sex trafficking is a $150 billion industry, which includes human beings being exploited and used as possessions. Okay? The Victims of Trafficking and Violence Protection Act of 2000 defines sex trafficking as a commercial sex act that is induced by force, fraud, or coercion. At this point, anyone can become a victim of human sex trafficking. Okay? I have met a judge, a very popular judge, who was a victim of human sex trafficking. And guess who trafficked him? His father, another prominent individual in the judicial world. So human sex trafficking is huge. Okay. So as of recent reports, an estimated 4.8 million people are trapped in forced sexual exploitation globally. Women and girls are disproportionately affected, making up like 99% of victims in the commercial sex industry. Okay. The International Labor Organization has estimated that more than 40 million individuals have been affected by human sex trafficking globally. And more specifically, the U.S. Department of State has reported claims that at least 17,000 people are trafficked into the U.S. each year. That's crazy. And a 52% increase in sex trafficking cases in the U.S. were reported to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Okay? And traffickers are increasingly using social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok to recruit and exploit victims, making digital vigilance essential. Okay, so now let's think about the new age that we're in. I have a 13, almost 14-year-old daughter. So you mean to tell me if she's playing Roblox that there's a potential trafficker or handler, because that's what they're called, who could be lurking? Suppose she's just trying to play a game. She's already being exposed. So there is a lot of things going on. Oh yes, thank you. So the movie Sounds of Freedom, I do have to watch that. Yeah, I definitely have to watch that. So you hear that, guys? Sounds of Freedom. It's a movie on Prime that will give a great visual regarding human sex trafficking. It is huge. Thank you for that. So here are some signs to be aware of, including individuals who seem isolated. So when we get those people who are isolated or they feel that they're being controlled or they're fearful, and they have unexplained absences from school or work, these are usually signs of human sex trafficking, especially of physical abuse, signs of physical abuse, right? Working as a forensic nurse in Baltimore City, I've seen a lot. I've seen the presence of cotton or debris in the vagina or rectum during physical exams, inability to keep appointments. So let's think about our medical professionals. When we have patients who come in or don't come in at all, they don't keep their appointments, we immediately assume that they are unreliable patients. We have to think about the whole picture because there's usually something else that's there. A lack of identification or scripted responses or inability to maintain eye contact or the presence of tattoos or branding scars. So let's think about our professionals, medical professionals who work in the emergency room or in the OR, the operating room. I had the pleasure of seeing so many different tattoos and branding scars, and I had no idea what it was. So when we're looking at, let's say, skulls or kisses or names, and usually it's on the chest or on the wrist or on the neck. It's usually in areas where it has to be seen. Okay. Barcodes are usually the biggest branding scars or tattoos. Barcodes. Okay. I've actually scanned a barcode with my phone and it worked and it tracks to the handler. So it's scary, but we just have to pay attention. Okay. Also, the presence of a person who does not allow the individual to speak or who does not want to leave them alone during an interview or care. Okay. So Every time patients come into my office and I see, maybe a loved one wanting to stay, I'm really, big on it. I'm asking questions. Hey, do you have to stay for the whole thing? Because appointments should be private, right? Unless you don't want it to be private. But it's about having that eye, okay? You said little boys are a hot thing for them. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And we're going to get into that because everyone thinks that human sex trafficking only deals with women and young girls. That is completely a myth. Completely a myth. Everyone is affected, no matter what age, gender, or race. About 10 minutes ago, I explained how my youngest patient was 3 years old and my oldest patient was 89 years old on hospice and on oxygen, right? Crazy. Now let's get back into the signs. Inconsistent stories, so conflicting stories or misinformation, poor physical and dental health. Okay? These are all the signs of human sex trafficking. All the signs. And believe it or not, a lot of us have missed these signs one way or another. And that's the sad part. That's why I'm shedding light on it today. We have all encountered a human sex trafficking victim and survivor at some point in our lives, and we just do not know. They have probably been called sex workers or, those who just strut or walk the streets. We don't know their stories. Think about us looking at those who come into, let's say, Planned Parenthood, and they're there for the fifth time that week to get tested for an STD. And we hear that nurse or medical professional say, "You're here again? Oh, you're just fast. Oh, you're just having too much sex. Well, you should just stop." Right? These are things that we hear. And this is why human sex trafficking is an issue, because we aren't compassionate enough or understanding enough to understand or know their situation. A lot of us quickly judge the situation. We may call them frequent flyers when really they are having issues. Okay. Nurses and sometimes nurse practitioners are the first and sometimes the only professionals that are able to interact with the human trafficking victim, because about 88% of human trafficking victims seek out medical help during their exploitation. And this is usually done in the emergency department or an outpatient center, like a clinic, right? However, there's always that block there because we must be aware of our own personal biases. Okay. But we are ideally positioned to identify and communicate with these victims. That means that we have to understand the complexities of the trafficking and the associated mindsets. So, a few years ago, I was asked to write a brief story about why I thought human sex trafficking, or why was the trafficking world their own culture. When I started to become close with many survivors of human sex trafficking, some were survivors and some were still victims because they weren't able to leave that mindset. They weren't able to leave their situation. I was able to see how they speak, how they work. I felt like I was undercover, but I wasn't. So it sounds like an undercover story. It's not. But I became close with many of them because I tried to keep tabs just to make sure that I know they were safe. Okay. And I was considered harmless to their handlers. And sometimes their handlers didn't know about me. But they have their own language, their own language, their own hierarchy of needs, their own leadership, right? So when we think about victims of human sex trafficking, one of the women there, or it could be a guy, they're going to be the lead. They're the top. So even though they're a victim, they have been trained to think that they are now under their handler or their handler's right hand man. But now they're going to start controlling the other victims that come under their wing. So they have their own, even how they eat, how they sleep, how they work, they have their own method of working. And when I presented this to the Department of Justice, they said, "Hey, please write something on this." I haven't written it yet. But I think I should, because we have to understand that we have so many subgroups of many cultures, right? It's not just, it's too complex. That's all I'm trying to say. Okay. So it's crucial for all of us to be vigilant and understand these signs. And by doing so, we can actually become the first line of defense against this crime. The problem is that it is a $1 billion industry. So it doesn't stop with us. We're the little people. I don't have $1 billion. Do you have $1 billion? We don't have that kind of money. That goes well beyond my pay grade. And it's crazy. It goes well beyond my pay grade. I have no idea. I can't fight this crime alone. So the most that I can do is my part, right? And with me being positioned in the medical field, I am now able to service survivors of human sex trafficking. So, for those who are just tuning in, I was just letting everyone know about 15 minutes ago that I was inspired to actually open up my own human sex trafficking clinic. However, it is considered to be secret, underground, private, so I can't share a lot of details. And it's just for our, patient safety. But I was inspired after becoming certified in forensics. So I have a clinic just for them. And why is it different? It's different because they need trauma informed care. They need to know that when they come to us, we have resources for them. Think about the medical gaps that are there. Survivors often face long term psychological effects, including PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And the road to recovery is challenging and it requires comprehensive support. Comprehensive support. And I'm physically located in the state of Maryland. Okay. State of Maryland. However, we are, oh, of course, I'll definitely DM you later. Absolutely. Absolutely. Located in Maryland. But remember that our impact goes across state lines. So we still have Washington, D.C., Washington State, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico. Okay. So when we also think about the psychological impacts, we have to also think about the medical impacts. So that's where my clinic comes in at because now I get to see what they need. Oh my, they need dental care. They need podiatry. They've been walking the streets. They need GYN. Oh my gosh, they have chronic medical conditions. So they have underlying HIV or other STDs, or they may have syphilis, right? That has never been treated. But guess what? They may also have liver disease. They also may be pregnant. You just never know. So honestly, before I became a nurse practitioner, my first human sex trafficking survivor was 16 years old. And she, no, 14. And she had the most horrible story. And it was so horrible that it made my feet cold because I couldn't understand how someone of her age could experience such hardship. And the problem was her brother is the one who actually sold her into the world of human sex trafficking. And this was in Virginia. I'm in Maryland. This was in Virginia. Okay. In Baltimore City, I had one case that was near and dear to my heart. Why? Because we were in Baltimore City and this person was being trafficked by their own father. So that was very near and dear to me. That's when I knew I had to pause because you get really close to your survivors and your victims. And I say survivors and victims because our victims are still there. She was a victim. She didn't have a chance to really survive yet because she couldn't get out, So it was a lot. Think about how COVID played a role in this, right? COVID played a huge role, especially with the pediatric population. So think about the children who had to stay home with their abuser, and their abusers are their handlers. Their abusers are their traffickers. Their abusers are sexually abusing them. The kids, we never really thought about that. We always thought about the screen time and how they're going to go to school. Think about those who go to school to escape the abuse and the mental trauma and, escaping the trafficking. They actually get to go to school for 8 hours and they don't have to worry about being sexually abused for 8 hours. But after that 8 hours is done, they have to go back home and it starts all over. So Communities can play a pivotal role by educating themselves and supporting survivor led initiatives and advocating for better policies and resources. The problem is that these people are being failed because this is not talked enough. It's not talked about enough. When I watch TV, you may see human sex trafficking here, but what do we always see? We always see the white box trucks. We always see, stuff that looks foreign to us. So when we're out on the street, we're looking for white trucks, but we're not looking next door to our neighbor. Like I said earlier, I have a human sex trafficking hotspot 5 minutes down the street, and I do not live in what they call urban or low income area. But down the street is the hotspot. That is scary. And what is technology's role? While technology has facilitated some aspects of trafficking, it also offers tools for prevention and rescue, including data analysis and online awareness campaigns. But we just need to have more awareness. It's like we only speak about this. We only speak about this every January, right? And current laws, they vary widely in effectiveness. So our laws here in Maryland are different from the ones in New York. They're different from the ones in Texas and different from the ones in Florida. And I mention those states because these are the hot spots, especially Florida, Texas, Maryland. We're on I-95. I can take I-95 straight to New York. Hey, I-95 goes straight down to Florida. These are the hot spots. These are the hot spots of sex trafficking. Okay. I was a part of one rescue mission where the handler was very confident. Why? Because he was friends with some sort of police officer in Baltimore City. And we actually recognized this survivor of human sex trafficking, and we separated her from the handler. And the handler knew what was going on, and he made a big commotion. He said, "I need my property back." It was to the point where we were at one of the most popular hospitals here in Maryland. We had to go to an underground tunnel to put this young lady in a medical Uber. And the Uber had to drive her 8 hours to an undisclosed location because her handler had the DMV on lock. He had all of the hotels, the small spots of the DMV under his wing. That is scary. That's scary. So these things happen, but they are rarely ever discussed. And when we think about handlers, people always think about, let's say, Spanish or foreign men. No one ever thinks about women. No one thinks about other races, African Americans, Caucasians, Asians. We never think about those, other types of handlers. Males, I mean, they're the top, but they're not the only ones. Just like our victims, they're not only women and young girls or females. Okay. So one of our listeners here, John, um, oh, okay, we just answered this question. He asks, well, hey, I only thought that this happens in foreign countries. Mm-mm. Human sex trafficking occurs in the U.S. across all states and communities, in rural towns, especially small towns and large cities. It's not a problem that's confined to other countries. It's a domestic issue as well. That's why we can hear stories about 36 people found in Texas, Houston, Texas. You know, we're not talking about the rural part of Texas. Okay. Another person commented, victims are always kidnapped or physically forced into trafficking. That is an untruth. While some victims are kidnapped, many are manipulated through psychological means, such as promises of love, stability, or job opportunities. That is why the ages vary. Okay? Traffickers can always use tactics of coercion, manipulation, and deceit rather than or in addition to physical force. So you don't always have to be forced into that way. It is usually the mindset. That's why it's important to teach our younger generation how to be confident, how to recognize the signs of human sex trafficking. We live in a technical world where social media dominates everything. Everything. And I'm pretty sure now human sex trafficking is probably at an all-time high. I had one victim recently who accidentally met her handler while gaming. So I've never gamed before, so I have no idea how that works. But she was gaming and they said, "Hey, let's game together." And they gamed together. And unfortunately, she was sexually assaulted. And she woke up in handcuffs and she was trafficked. And it's a sad story, but it happens. And these are things that we should be educating children about. Okay. And again, here's another myth: only women and girls are victims. And although, again, women and girls are disproportionately affected, men and boys can also be victims of human sex trafficking. That is why that statistic sits there, that disproportionate right there. It's there because we don't even consider men to be victims. And during my tenure as being a forensic nurse practitioner, um, I met a lot of men who were raped and sexually assaulted. I've met a ton. And you would be surprised about even how they look, because everyone assumes that, hey, if you are, for especially for a man, if you are put in this situation, then you must be smaller. You must be, meek. No, they're like 6'4", bigger guys who you wouldn't think, but that's because we're putting our own biases into something that we should not be. You see, that's the problem. That is the problem. So recognizing that trafficking affects all genders is important for a comprehensive understanding and response. That is why that disproportionate rate exists, because we do not consider boys or men to be victims. And honestly, I hear about it more now when we think about men who finally come in for counseling or therapy for depression. Hear their stories. Hear their stories about how their coaches trafficked them or molested them. You hear a lot. It's very sad, but it's eye opening. Okay. Oh yes, we have another comment from, looks like her name is Suzanne. Hey Suzanne. She states that she heard that trafficking always involves overt violence or restraints. Absolutely not. Here's the reality. Like mentioned before, traffickers use subtle forms of control, such as threats, manipulation, and emotional abuse. So when we see couples who are together and we see the abuse, think about what's going on. Think about what is going on for that other person who is being victimized. Okay. Because victims do not, victims attempt to seek help. Well, let's clear that up. It is hard for a victim to attempt to seek help when in public. Why? Because it's always some sort of fear, manipulation, or because they are closely monitored by their traffickers. If you are your handler's favorite prize or possession, it's going to take something to get you to break from them. Okay. But here's the bigger picture here: they don't seek help because they can't trust the help. Isn't that sad? If they come to the hospital, they have a chance of being re-victimized all over again. So they go back to where it's comfortable. They also fear law enforcement because now, if they are considered to be a sex worker, guess what? You get locked up for that. What about if you were forced into that life? So you see how the legal system is weird? Because a lot of these victims are forced to do things, whether it's steal. So now they actually have, records of them, for themselves. So they're fearing law enforcement due to threats from their traffickers or their own uncertain legal status. Think about those who come over to the US illegally. Now, not only were they victimized here, if they get caught, they actually may get deported. That's insane. That's insane. And absolutely, yes. So your husband rescued a few victims. So that's great, number one, because It is so hard to rescue a victim of human trafficking and human sex trafficking. It's so hard. It's so hard, especially human sex trafficking, because that's a whole different ballgame. Um, Handlers, yes, they offer jobs, talent opportunities, especially those who are looking for money. They're depressed. They are trying to get on their feet. So, of course, of course, I want to, become a model. Of course, I want to act. Of course, I want to sing. Or, you know, hey, of course, I want to do this movie. Of course, I want to help you cook. They need things, but it's all about within. So, a lot of the victims here, they are searching for something. And that's the sad part, because their search has become so strong that another person can just like prey on it, you know? And when they come here, if someone is brought here from another country, hey, guess what? These are certain jobs that are open, right? Certain jobs are open, so they think. But guess what? You might have to exchange sex for it. This is sexual exploitation. So even now, I always tell people, when you go to these not medical spas, when you go to the massage parlors, just pay attention to who's in there. Now that I know what I'm looking for, I am always on guard. There's a spa now, and I always squint every time I park in front of it, because their clientele is strictly men. And so I said, I never see any women going here. And I wondered, and I said, I want to go in there one day just to see why there's only men. Usually massage parlors have a few different types of genders, right? We have different populations. And so I always say, I said, please do not let human sex trafficking be under my nose, because now that I know how prevalent it is and how close it is under my nose, and now that I've had these victims from age 3 to 89, I'm always looking, even when I see people in cars, or it's strange, and it's sad, but I'm hoping that today these stories will shed some light on things that usually people never shed light on. Okay. Now, human sex trafficking is my baby. That's my topic. But human trafficking alone includes, it also includes labor trafficking. So while sex trafficking is pervasive, focusing only on this aspect, think we can overlook victims of of human trafficking for labor, like in industries like agriculture, domestic work, and manufacturing. Oh my gosh, there is a ton we can't even begin to know where to start, because that's another rabbit hole. But these are the realities, right? These are our realities, and it's just sad. Okay. So remember that trafficking does not require movement across borders. Many victims are trafficked within their own country, their state, and even within their own communities. And remember that any gender, any race, any socioeconomical class can be trafficked, okay? And it's not always done by force. Sometimes it's just something as simple manipulation, okay? And that is that. You know, I pledge to stay informed, and I will always report suspicious activities and support organizations working in this field. Um, I just want to thank you all for definitely being very vocal tonight. Okay, I have some followers here on Instagram Live, Facebook, and YouTube. Um, so thank you. This means a lot to me, because human sex trafficking is definitely near and dear to my heart. Um, I want you all to know that I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the support that everyone has been giving, especially since we've started Health Tea with Dr. B. Just thank you all, because this definitely means a lot to me. So please do not forget to follow us again on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. I'm not as active on YouTube because I just don't know how to work it. That's it. That is all. I just don't know how to work it. Just one step at a time. I promise. One step at a time. I promise that I will get it together. So remember, if you have any questions for me, if you ever want to be a guest star, if you have topics that you all want to hear about, please do not hesitate. I mean, reach out to me on bit.ly/health tea with Dr. B. I would love to definitely discuss all these topics. I would love to go live with any other medical professionals because it is time for us to take healthcare back. It is time for us to spread awareness because there are so many topics out there that are just left hanging. Not only are we dealing with, misdiagnoses and cancers and maternal deaths, high maternal death rates. We're now dealing with human sex trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault. I mean, you name it. Okay. But again, I thank all of you for your support always. You all take care because now that was the tea. All right, now I will see you all in 2 weeks. All right, guys. Bye.